What does player progression in ZZZ look like? After you have raised your internet level to unlock all game's features and got acquainted with the gearing system and numerous battle mechanics, you will get bombarded with many endgame modes. At this point, you've probably already dipped into the Lost Void, as it patches holes in your fresh roster with trial agents while awarding a lot of polychromes for filling up race collection. Depending on your pooling choices, you will end up with one fully built team with proper synergy, or a couple of teams where one or two agents are good enough for now. It allows you to start tackling periodic endgame modes, even though higher scores and difficulties might be out of reach for you yet. With a little more investment, S ranks in Shiyu Defense and 9-star Deadly Assault become the new norm. And that's when you can start truly testing your roster and skill in threshold simulation and battle towers. This progression was quite responsive to upgrades to your account, and kept giving you new goals as soon as you found the old one not so challenging anymore. But then, everything changed when the version 2.5 had arrived, and with it, Shiyu Defense structure was altered. Before New Year's update, Shiyu Defense had 7 stages, with each featuring 2 fights requiring non-intersecting teams. Ranks were awarded based on the time remaining after clearing both sides. Usually that kind of ranking system allowed you to bring a stronger team for one of the sides, and play your less invested option on the other one. Obviously, enemies and buffs still affected your agent choices, but on average Shiyu Defense was clearable with a certain degree of freedom in team building and account investment strategies. Well, what about now? Starting with 2.5, Shiyu Defense has less stages overall, only 5 instead of 7, but the 5th one is upgraded to having 3 fights. The rank is awarded based on your performance in fights individually, so in order to get S rank in total, you would need to S rank all 3 fights. The scoring system has gotten an update too. Now you earn points for dealing damage multiplied by a specific number, and that number goes down sharply with time. These unique requirements reward one specific strategy. Using all your resources in the first minute of the fight nets you a higher score than saving resources until a stun window. There are multiple issues with that. Firstly, the strategy of dumping all your resources as you get them is counterintuitive to what you have learned about the game mechanics before, through tutorials and previous floors of Shiyu Defense itself. The most common way of dealing with ZZZ enemy is to fill the stun meter, double chain into your DPS, and unleash their ultimate or special resources. Even with anomaly teams that might have less control over their nuke timings, you would still be mindful of enemies taking days and try to hold on to the full anomaly gauge if the enemy is about to get stunned. With new Shiyu Defense, you are incentivized to focus less on building the stun meter and more on spending resources as you get them. As a result, agents that focus their damage on the stun window, or well, almost the entire specialty of stunners, became less valuable to pull for. Besides, heavy focus on damage output makes dodging and parrying less attractive. The problem is not exactly new and had existed before the Shiyu Defense change. Both rotating endgame modes treat each fight as a clean slate, making health less of a concern. But while Deadly Assault still requires a parry or dodge here and there, Shiyu Defense after update forces you to play aggressively and try to ignore incoming damage as much as possible. Agents that utilize dodges and parries to build their resources get punished by the score multiplier for wasting time on actually engaging with the enemy. The second wave of the enemies, that usually consists of a mini-boss, matters a lot less than the first wave, and it goes against everything you've got used to in video games. Typically, those would have been the fodder enemies to warm up, not the win requirement. The run is decided in the first minute, but you won't know if you made it or not until you finish it. To tackle the updated Shiyu Defense, you need 3 teams. Your team building choices and playstyle are now limited further by the artificial score multiplier, on top of already having to adhere to element checks and enemies' characteristics. In a way, it became a worse deadly assault, with no above choices, no ability to share the gear, and more demanding scores. While a lot of older problems with Shiyu still remain, the new system doesn't make fighting that much more engaging than before, and with a wider selection of enemies, it still can't serve as a damage benchmark as universally as Deadly Assault does. But what about Deadly Assault itself? Well, it's not without issues either. The first season featured 5 bosses, majority of whom had no resistances and didn't favor specific playstyles, with one exception. In the second season, we saw a bigger variety. To begin with, every new enemy has at least one resistance, with Primordial Nightmare and Discordant Solo having 2 with 1 weakness instead. At this point, we don't have enough DPS to cover a variety of specialties and attributes to justify these restrictions. Weaknesses and resistances, in my opinion, are not different sides of the same coin. When a boss has a weakness, you get rewarded for bringing a team with matching attributes, and your agents perform above their normal. However, you can still bring agents that don't match the attribute to the fight, and it won't hurt their performance, you just won't get extra out of them. Resistance, on the other hand, actively punishes wrong attributes, reducing damage, anomaly buildup, and days to below normal levels. Having 1 to 2 agents of neutral attribute in the team isn't going to hurt your ability to reach good scores, and will happen quite often with stunners, supports, and secondary anomaly. Whereas in case of resistances, it would be better to outright replace a team member matching the resistance, as their performance gets hurt quite noticeably. While you were busy with mystic duties in the second season, Ethereals were training. Pre-miasma enemies had little variety in stats, while second season enemies show nothing but growth. The most notable value that grew uncontrollably is Anomaly Gauge. As a result, Anomaly team's performance lowered, despite having a patch with the boss that should have made them shine. Miasmic Fiend and Miasma Priest have the same Anomaly Gauge value, which is already higher than all first season's bosses. Days required to stun an enemy has also increased. In case of some bosses, it's less of a problem, as many of them got chains of attack with multiple parries. But as a trend, it's still worrying. When something takes, something else should give. Ideally, if a boss features higher anomaly gauge, they should compensate with lower days or defense, and vice versa. But it's not what we are seeing in the second season. Wandering Hunter has the highest defense in the game and second highest anomaly gauge, but his days meter is still higher than first season's average. Although, if you never checked third-party websites and communities, you wouldn't know about these differences in stats and rely on buffs and occasional hints from the game to help you navigate the team building. Indeed, the purpose of his higher defense is to narrow your team building options to Rapture teams only, which would have been redundant as Miasma Shield mechanic introduced in the second season already favors the specialty. Most of new bosses have this stage, and during it, the majority of your cast will struggle to deal damage. When protected by Miasma Shield, enemies increase their resistance, forcing you to hold all actions and focus on clearing it instead. The timing of the stage alone is enough to screw you around. I'm sure that many of us have experienced the boss summoning Miasma Shield right before you were about to stun them. What's worse is that you can still trigger attribute anomalies while the boss is protected by the shield, wasting the damage completely. Some of the bosses came with flurry of parries, making dealing with the stage easier, but some others have unreliable attack patterns, which adds a random element to the fight that is out of your control. As an upside, Miasma stage gives resources for clearing it, and deals some days to the boss. but it's still overstaying its welcome, with most bosses in the second season having it, and I hope to move on to something more engaging in the next season. Miasma Shield, as an already limited mechanic, sometimes exists on top of enemies' skillful waste of your time. For example, the Defiler spends 50 seconds of the fight invulnerable. This role is stingy enough to give you only 20-second window to build his first day's meter, while the Primordial Nightmare is a literal nightmare to fight. At the first glance, she is an example of a boss that answers some of my criticism. She builds anomaly and stun extremely slow, but compensates for it with significantly lower defense. On paper, that should have made her the better boss for attack teams. In practice, however, the windows for dealing damage to her are just as limited as for this role. The fight opens up with a parry sequence. Then she enters a miasma stage. It is possible to clear the shield fully in one go, but it requires encountering a specific sequence of attacks. If you didn't get lucky, Nightmare exits the shield stage, and after a certain amount of days was accumulated, she will interrupt the fight again with the remaining shield. Even in perfect conditions, the first stun will start about 1 minute into the fight, and it's pretty difficult to get more than 2 stun windows. The boss is tailored not for a specialty, but for one very specific attack agent that doesn't care about stun. And the in-game team suggestions, alongside community most often chosen agent for this fight, reflect that. This role is another example of the boss being a pain for no reason. A good portion of the fight, you will be dealing with someone Sobek that doesn't have an anomaly gauge and doesn't have Days Mirror. That's two most basic game mechanics that are absent from this encounter. Extremely restrictive design is disappointing. First season bosses didn't require any specific playstyle except for Bringer, but the discontent with his fight probably got drowned by Miyabi's outstanding popularity. Yet when players ask how to deal with a boss that's so specifically tailored for one agent, the answer shouldn't be just pull for that agent. I wouldn't pull for a meta unit specifically to reach the last remaining polychrome reward in refreshing endgame mode. It might take years for that investment to pay for itself. Lastly, let's talk about the dreaded HP inflation. It has been a notable topic for discussion for the past several months. At this point, pretty much every single boss in Deadly Assault is significantly beefier than at their debut, with some outright tripling their health. Primordial Nightmare is the highest health boss that got above this version, when non-Yashunguan teams were already struggling with it. On rare occasions when the boss health was adjusted down or stayed the same, for the next appearance it would shoot back up again. Back in the patch 2.1, I shared my scores for Miasmic Fiend, a team without mindscapes and only one signature W engine, but with matching attributes and synergy, was able to reach score of 40,000. Here is the run with the same team, done just 4 patches later. I barely reached 24,000. I didn't suddenly become a worse player, but Fiend's health grew by 50%, making this fight significantly harder than before. Updated Shiyu Defense is too new to say if the inflation will hit it too, and in a way it matters less there, as long as the first wave of enemies is still clearable under 30 to 40 seconds. However, we have already had a rerun for Heretic Jester in the updated Shiyu, and as you can see, the total health of the stage went up, so Shiyu is not going to be immune to the inflation too. Is all hope lost? The short answer is not at all. Let's consider some positives. Health inflation is not new for Hoyoverse games. Honkai Star Rail is notoriously known for its 400% increase in endgame health pools over the couple of years, while Genshin's equivalent of Shiyu Defense for the past year saw 100% increase. ZZZ's trends for now are staying in the middle, and considering the higher skill ceiling of the game, health pools growth partially might be a reflection of the player base discovering and sharing new techniques and combos. Despite increasing difficulty, polychrome rewards are staying fairly available. Getting 6 stars in Deadly Assault shouldn't be an issue for a mid-invested account, and if you can't S-rank new Shiyu Defense, you are only missing on 60 polychromes compared to an older version. Void Hunters are still great agents at dealing with Deadly Assault and Shiyu with lower-cost teams. They have a pretty good coverage in terms of specialties, elements and teammates, so it's not unusual to see full clears with the trio. This upside does come with a drawback. If you happen to dislike some, or maybe even all 3 Void Hunters, you might find yourself struggling to keep up with the players that did pull for most of them. But other agents aren't stagnating, and keep getting enhancements in various forms, from new teammates to disc sets and straight-up upgrades. Moonlight Lullaby, for example, gives a better damage bonus than Swing Jazz available from the game's release, and the buff condition is easier to maintain, resulting in better performance for supports. Some older agents received an awakening potential system. For example, if you fully level it up for Soldier 11, you will get an increase to her damage by about 15%. New agents, especially Yuzuha, Lucia and Dialin, have increased their team's damage. Of course, there is a different way to look at it. Some agents were unlucky to be replaced with a better option, which makes pulling on their reruns less attractive. Dialin power-crept almost every single stunner immediately after Zufufu's suspiciously fast rerun, which makes players skeptical of returning agents in general. Now it is seen less of a chance to pick up a Mindscape or two to boost performance, but as a sign of needing to pick up a Mindscape or two to keep up with new, shinier unit. While these enhancements separately don't match health growth, players still manage to level the scores. The percentage of users capable of getting 9 stars in Deadly Assault stayed the same as a year ago, and if one of the first season bosses is present, it becomes even higher. Community-based scores for several main DPS agents from 1.6 to 2.4, if went down, did so by a negligible amount, but often increased for agents that got upgrades or new teammates. But I would argue that scores aren't everything. It's a game, not a job, so it's important that players keep enjoying it. And that's where my biggest issue with current endgame lies. Between rising difficulty, restrictive mechanics, and ever-growing list of requirements to your roster, ZZZ endgame is becoming a bit overwhelming. Timed fights are the most creatively bankrupt way to challenge a player. And while Simulation's Threshold is a step in a better direction, for now it's still lacking as an alternative option. I like the decision tree determining the final boss choice, but as someone who loves games with roguelike elements, I would prefer if the game mode leaned into the branching path mechanic even more. We already have paths and upgrade choices in the Lost Void, but runs there stop feeling unique fast, and Wizarding Garden is overall not liked by players, although I quite enjoy the team gathering aspect of the mode and the mechanic of managing pressure. The rewarding sense of a challenge that I felt in the early patches of the game, on the last steps to the final boss with full pressure and multiple debuffs, is something the game couldn't replicate for me yet. But the narrative elements and branching paths in Simulation's Threshold are intriguing. I just want more of them. As for Shiyu Defense, one can be said for sure. It needed an upgrade. A lot of players found all Shiyu to be a chore, but the manner in which it got updated didn't help with this feeling, just added stress instead. I would have liked for Shiyu Defense to lean into the second word in its name, and have hordes of smaller enemies with the goal of defending something stationary or having a score based on cleared number of waves. Having one resetting endgame mode revolve around boss battles and another around AoE is a classic structure that incentivizes account diversification, or simply saying pulling for new characters, without gatekeeping high scores behind restrictive buffs and mechanics. Let's go back to the player progression that I outlined in the beginning of the video. With Shiyu Defense no longer doable without 3 teams capable of strong damage, the middle step of progression ladder is gone, and it's a choice that, in my opinion, is unreasonably hostile to newer players. The gap between being able to clear the second to last node of Shiyu and earning 6 stars in Deadly Assault to clearing 5th node with S rank or 9 star in Assault is huge. Personally, I can get S+ ranks in new Shiyu Defense, but I don't see myself striving for that score every time. Back in the first season, when I tried clearing Pompeii in Deadly Assault with Soldier 11, the problem of not being able to reach 3 stars was simple. It was me. I knew that character could do better damage. I just needed to learn to play them correctly and figure out the best attainable build. But big part of my motivation to learn her playstyle was not only getting the score right now, but building a reliable team capable of clearing content until a new fire agent I like showed up. With HP inflation, I am losing that motivation. The reward for doing well is that the next time it will become harder. So the effort required to learn precise rotation lacks payoff. Now, when I spend free time and in-game resources to manage a great clear with my fairly low investment account, I wonder if I add to the statistics and my effort can be interpreted wrongly, that the endgame is still not hard enough. You could argue that it's natural for live service games to increase numbers to nudge players into leaving their comfort teams and trying out new characters. But I naively expected more from ZZZ. This game has an amazing variety in weaponry and playstyles, not to mention outstanding work on animation. So something more Devil May Cry-like could have been a greater way of motivating the players. But we already have the skeleton of such a system in the game. Battle Trial Glory gives out points for essentially stylish gameplay. Performing a combo, double chain, not taking damage during the fight, all this add to your score. It's a much cooler and engaging system of evaluating new gameplay without pushing you into a specific playstyle. But the problem with Battle Trial is that it gets way too unforgiving, way too fast. Challenging floors beyond first 50 requires you to not only know your teams very well, but also know enemies' patterns to be able to parry and dodge without a flash indicator. While preparing for this video, I ran all endgame modes in one day to make sure that I haven't missed anything, and left with a couple of feelings. First, Battle Trial was still the most fun I had in the battle. Seeing score grow for chosen actions felt really good. And the announcements of your technique ranks, like in a fighting game, are very rewarding. Expanding the score system to include higher level combos for harder to play agents, for example the number of Evelyn's chains or Harumasa's dashes performed during a stun, or Banyue's perfect cancels, could be a cool way of highlighting and promoting less casual agents. Second thought is that I have experienced the boss fatigue. From Lost Void to Threshold Simulation, everything except for Shiyu Defense are the same boss battles. Some mini-bosses such as doppelgangers have the coolest movesets in the game and provide actually challenging fights, but there are significantly less opportunities to play against them. What do you think on the state of ZZZ endgame? Do you agree or disagree with me? Please leave all your thoughts down in the comments. I'm really curious to read them. If you would like some help in clearing Notorious Hunt, or maybe occasional chat about the game in general, please join my outpost. Thank you so much for watching, consider subscribing if you haven't done it yet, and I will see you soon. Bye bye!